Whenever you buy or sell a stock, bond, exchange-traded fund, or mutual fund, there are two important dates to understand: the transaction date and the settlement date. T is the transaction date. As its name implies, the transaction date represents the date on which the actual trade occurs. For instance, if you buy 100 shares of a stock today, then today is the transaction date. This date doesn't change whatsoever, as it will always be the date on which you made the transaction. However, the settlement date is a little trickier because it represents the time at which ownership is transferred. It's important to understand that this doesn't always occur on the transaction date and varies depending on the type of security. Key takeaways. In order to clear the transfer of a security from a seller to a buyer, it must go through a settlement process, which creates a delay between the time a trade is made, T, and when it settles. On May 28, 2024, the settlement cycle became a T+1, according to a rule from the SEC. Historically, a stock trade could take as many as 5 business days, T+5, to settle a trade. Today, with the advances in technology and electronic trading, most stock trades settle in just 1 business day, T+1. Why delay actual settlement? In the past, security transactions were done manually, rather than electronically. Investors would wait for the delivery of a particular security, which was in actual certificate form, and payment happened upon receiving the certificate. Since delivery times could vary and prices always fluctuate, market regulators set a period of time in which securities and cash must be delivered. Some years ago, the settlement date for stocks was T+5 or 5 business days after the transaction date. T+1 settlement cycle. The SEC's decision, effective May 28, 2024, to halve the time it takes to settle transactions, is generally good news for most investors, as it means gaining or offloading ownership rights sooner. Reverting back to T+1 after a century makes markets more efficient and reduces risk. With this move, the SEC helped reduce agreed-upon prices being drastically different to the price when the trade eventually settles, a concern that has been on its radar since the GameStop stock bounce of 2021. In a statement, the SEC said the new rules make our market plumbing more resilient, timely, and orderly, and improve the processing of institutional trades by establishing new processing and record-keeping requirements for broker-dealers and registered investment advisors. When do you actually own the stock or get the money? If you buy or sell a security with a T+1 settlement on Monday, and we assume there are no holidays during the week, the settlement date will be Tuesday. The T or transaction date is counted as a separate day. Not every security will have the same settlement periods. Which securities are affected by T+? The new T+1 settlement cycle applies to securities in the U.S. that previously traded in the T+2 settlement cycle. They include stocks, bonds, municipal securities, exchange-traded funds, certain mutual funds, and limited partnerships that trade on an exchange. Could the settlement cycle ever be T+0? Now that T+1 has been achieved, people have begun to ask whether a T+0 settlement cycle is feasible, particularly as it has already been rolled out in countries such as India. At present, it doesn't seem very likely that this will happen in the US. Moving to T+1 took years to achieve, was already ambitious, and in some cases made deadlines to settle trades too close for comfort. Taking it a step further might not yet be feasible, at least as things currently stand. What does the T stand for in T+1? The T is shorthand for the transaction date, which is the day the purchase or sale is registered. +1 means the transaction will clear 1 business day later. The bottom line. When you place an order to buy or sell a security, the trade doesn't become final immediately. It takes a while for it to clear and everything to get signed off. T, or the transaction date, is when the transaction takes place, and the settlement date, expressed as plus a number, is when the transaction goes through. Settlement dates depend on the security being traded. In the US, stocks and most bonds are T+1, meaning trades for them settle 1 business day after the transaction is made.